This episode is sponsored by Be Water Smart, bewatersmart.info. Drought and water conservation is a way of life in the West, but saving water should always be a good garden practice wherever you live. Be Water Smart is making it their goal to help gardeners, homeowners, and residents do their part with helpful tips, videos, and links. You will find tips on irrigation, such as when you should water, which type of drip or sprinklers are best, and even a very helpful video on how to convert standard sprinklers to drip. Plus, what I always preach about, mulching. Remember, no pixie dust. And you'll even find a video of me talking about it. And of course, you've heard me say over and over again, check your soil moisture before you water. Why waste water when not necessary? Be Water Smart has helpful tips so you know you are watering efficiently and correctly. This includes how to water trees and even save 30% more on lawn irrigation. Plus, they have a database of 1,800 low water use plants. Yes, 1,800 plants. Plus, garden tours and pictures to help you design and plant your water-wise landscaping. And since Watering Smart saves not only our precious resource, but helps you save money, they have links for rebates and services. So stay current on Be Water Smart news by signing up so you don't miss important info. That's bewatersmart.info.
Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and this episode is going to be your December garden to-do list. And just remember, I'm coming at this from Zone 9. Your zone most likely is different. And of course, your chores that you need to do in your garden are probably going to be slightly different, if not a lot different, depending on your zone. So always check. And if you're not sure of the zone you're in, if you just Google USDA garden zones, a map will pop up and you could figure them out from there. So I'm just going to go through a list of things that I'm doing in the garden, others should be doing in the garden. And of course, if I forget something, email me and let me know. And of course, I could be reached at marlenetheplantlady@gmail.com. You could also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Marlene the Plant Lady. And just a note, I changed my YouTube address to Everything Gardening with Marlene Simon. It just sort of incorporates all aspects of gardening. So if you've already signed up and you were following me, you don't need to re-follow. It's just a name change. But if you haven't followed me, there's some good stuff there. And I've just filmed 3 more YouTubes today. So I'm going to edit those and put those up. And so let's get started. So what to do in the garden for December. So of course, if it's very rainy, very wet where you're at, you're going to probably not want to work that ground too much. I went to someone's house the other day. I was helping them decide what to do in the garden, and they're in an area by a river, and their water table is very shallow. And I was amazed at how wet and soppy the soil is versus where I'm really far away from a river and we don't have that problem. So it was just amazing that within a 20-minute drive, the water table levels are incredibly different. So don't work wet soils. All right, so what can you plant this time of year in Zone 9? You might have noticed at the nursery there are bare root plants coming in already. And bare root simply means there's no soil around the roots. They dig them up. They either put them in sawdust, burlap, wrap them up, bring them to a nursery. They're either sold in bags or the nurseries put them in sort of bays of sawdust or sand. And as a consumer, you could pull them out and inspect the roots that way. Bagged, you can't really inspect the roots too much. If you do only find them in bags, make sure you lift them up and they're not full of water, because that is just one way to guarantee that you are going to have a rotted plant. But if they're in bays, it's really nice to be able to pull them out and inspect the roots, a good equal distribution. Sometimes they've pruned the roots pretty severe and there's not a lot. So don't freak out if you pull them out and you're like, wow, there's no roots at all. So they could be pretty minimal. Remember, it's not like pulling out a full growing plant. There's not going to be feeder roots. That's just going to be the main structure. So your fruit trees should be coming in. December's a little early for them. January is sort of the full swing. But I was at a nursery the other day and they had bare root grapes, bare root blackberries, raspberries, gooseberries even. And you're probably going to find some asparagus. and other bare root crops like that. So keep an eye out for those. And vegetable-wise, some of your leafy greens you could still plant, like bok choy, kale, loose leaf lettuce, mustards, and of course you could plant radishes still by seed. And so that's pretty much it as far as planting. Can you plant perennials? Yes, technically you could still plant non-frost sensitive perennials. But once again, it's that if your soil is wet, you don't want to dig into it. You don't want to compact it. So then it is a good idea to wait until the soil dries out a bit. But for California natives, now's a good time. Once again, if you could work the soil. All right, make sure you're moving your succulents out of the rain. If they're out and about in pots and you can move them up, it's just going to help them a little bit survive, because remember, most things that what kills succulents the most is poor drainage. And if you go out after a rain and you notice there's standing water in your pot or in the saucer, definitely then dump it out. So if they're too big to bring inside, definitely check them after a rainstorm. You don't want any standing water. They're really not growing this time of year, so they don't need water, and just that standing water could just kill them. So either bring them up close to the house, or then just dump out the trays or the pots. Weeds, oh boy, I know that the Oxalis weed is just taking over, and that's a tough one because it spreads by the tubers and also by seeds. So if you let it go to flower, you're going to get it. And then, of course, the tubers just multiply. A whole bunch of other winter weeds. But you've heard me mention before, the best way of controlling weeds is not letting them go to flower, so you don't get more seeds in the soil. And then you've also heard me mention use a weed eater, smother the weeds with cardboard. But that is going to be really, in the long run, you're going to benefit from controlling weeds right now. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Protect from frost. We are supposed to have our first true frost, meaning low 30s at the end of this week. And we haven't had a frost yet. And, a lot of plants could just make it through just fine. But some of your more sensitive plants are going to need to be covered and protected. Some plants can't even handle temperatures below 50, and those should have been brought in or they would have died already, and you treat them as annuals. But things such as, your plumerias, maybe some of your citrus, bougainvilleas, they're going to need to be protected if they're not really protected by other plants. And how to protect your plants is, once again, if they're in a pot, bring them up close to the house. The heat from your house is going to be your best friend. If you can't, or even then it's still not warm enough, use a cotton sheet or one of the frost blankets and drape it over. And then don't do the lollipop thing. Don't just tie it up underneath the foliage. Make sure that if it's in a pot, you pin the fabric underneath the pot. If it's in the ground, definitely pin it to the soil. The soil actually will then radiate heat up. And you want that to be slightly moist soil. It radiates heat up even greater, which shouldn't be a problem for most people. And then I know around here we've had so much fog that's actually kept the moisture in the soil pretty well. But that's just a note. If it's been a very dry winter for you, wet the ground a little bit before frost, and then cover and then pin it down and allow the moisture and the heat to radiate up. And don't use plastic, because plastic's just basically, if it touches the foliage, it could actually freeze your foliage. And of course, if you forget to take it off the next day and it happens to be a bright sunny day, it can actually cause some damage if temperatures spike up. So not plastic, something that's breathable. That's why the frost blankets are great. But like I said, if you need to use a sheet, go ahead. And as far as the holiday lights to put around them, a lot of them these days are just LED lights that don't put off a lot of heat. So make sure that they're the C9 or C7. So even if you see ones that are like old-fashioned Christmas lights, make sure they're not LEDs, because they're not going to put the heat off. So in addition, you can put lights around your plants. They are going to put heat off, so make sure they're not touching foliage, and that just adds some benefits. And speaking of watering the soil, a plant going into a frost handles freezing temperatures much better when it's hydrated. The opposite is actually true for a succulent, probably because it already has enough moisture. And if you add any more moisture to it, you could literally, when it freezes, it is possible that it can literally almost burst. So remember, a leafy plant wants to be well watered going into a frost. Succulent, don't water it. any extra. In fact, less water in the winter is better for your succulents. So that's a frost protection, coming into a frost if we have one. People always ask, well, how do I know? How do I know what to cover? Well, there's a whole wide range of what plants can handle. Like today I was talking about poinsettias, and technically poinsettias don't like to be outside when it's 50 or below. So those should have been covered and been protected already. Or, like I said, you treat them as annuals and they die. Then there's other plants that could handle temperatures down into the 20s. So if we get an unusually cold temperature, you're going to want to protect those plants. And you really don't know unless you know the plant's name, and you could look it up to see where they're native to or see what they could handle. So when in doubt, try to find out what the plant's name is. And if you made it through last year, chances are you don't really need to do any more than you did last year, because until they say we're going to unusually cold spell, it should be fine. So, ask a neighbor, hey, do you know what this plant is? And they might be able to tell you, or send it to me, or go to your nursery and they'll be able to tell you and go, okay, this is where it's from. These are the coldest temperatures. I'll need to cover it for this. Because even citrus, there's citrus that could, handle temperatures down into the 20s, and other citrus don't like even temperatures, high 30s. So it just really depends on your plant. So you may also be noticing some pests in your garden if you're growing a winter garden, and your primary pests for your winter vegetable garden are going to be your cabbage aphids and your cabbage looper. Cabbage aphids they're very distinct because they have a great very waxy coating on them. You never see them in summer. Shouldn't say that, but I've never seen them in summer. Hopefully we don't see them in summer. That just means there's a lot of climate change going on. And they love cabbage and Brussels sprouts and all those types of vegetables. And they're really hard to get rid of because that wax on them, really nothing penetrates into it. Neem oil doesn't really work. Soap spray, a hose blast is probably your best bet. And I actually have one cabbage that's loaded with them. And I'm like, oh, do I get rid of this cabbage plant, or do I just sort of allow this cabbage plant to be and use it sort of as a banker, i.e. sacrificial plant in this case, and they won't spread. They are spreading slightly to another one, but I'm just going to, take a hose and blast those off and hopefully keep them onto the one that really, hopefully you have space for more than just one. That's a problem if you're just growing, have space for one cabbage, then it's like, dang. Then take a hose blast, but there's really not too many controls for it. Cabbage looper is a green worm that hits your winter vegetables in the leaves generally, and you notice big, large holes, and you also notice their poo. If you turn a leaf over, you usually find the cabbage looper. It can blend in, so it's a little tough, but just hand pick it off, squish it. One can do a lot of damage, so you might only have one on there that's eating all the holes. And I've mentioned BT, the bacillus, spray it every few days, especially if it's wet. It's just going to wipe off, but it's completely safe to use. So those are your two main garden pests for the vegetables. Everything else is sort of just dying down. But remember, things are overwintering. So if you've had leaf-footed bugs, if you've had stink bugs, you're going to want to do more cleanup and more debris cleanup than not, because they could overwinter and all that. So remember to pick up any dead fruit if you haven't yet, any fruit that's, mummified. They call them mummies that are still hanging on the tree. Remove those. And now is a good time to spray liquid copper and any dormant oils. Liquid copper is a great overall fungicide. You definitely want to spray your peaches and nectarines to treat and prevent peach leaf curl. If you've had it, your tree has the spores, and what you're doing is just keeping it in check, so it's really not a bad infestation. If you don't have it, you definitely don't want to get it, so spray your trees at least once, if not twice. Ideally 3 before the flowers break in as early as February, beginning of February. So try to get those sprays in. You can mix in an oil that helps to spread it a little bit more. And also horticultural dormant oils can smother overwintering insects and eggs. So if you've had a problem with aphids or mealybugs, you could spray an oil as well and hope to sort of smother some problems. If you have leaf spot or rust, you could spray liquid copper because, like I said, it's sort of an overall fungicide for plants. And let's see what else we've got going on. You could still plant bulbs, your spring flowering bulbs like daffodils and tulips. In fact, your tulips probably should just come out of the fridge and start being planted because remember, they need a chill. I actually have some small little narcissus blooming already outside. But yes, still plant bulbs for your spring. And I think that is it for my list of what to do in your garden for this month. Of course, hopefully you're enjoying your garden. If you have vegetables, hopefully you're harvesting and you're enjoying all the different stages of plants and foliage color. And if I am forgetting something like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she forgot this, email me because, of course, I forget things. So remember, email me at marlenetheplantlady@gmail.com. And if you like this podcast, remember to rate and review. And if your friend is into gardening, why don't you share this episode because it sort of keeps them on track of what to do in their garden if they're sort of lost and confused and not sure what to do. But until next time, everyone, happy gardening.